So I've been playing a lot of Overwatch lately. An unhealthy amount, actually, like 30 hours just this week. And there was an update, right? There was an update. And it added something that I didn't even know existed, which it added a story cutscene. And then I realized Overwatch has a story? Why does Overwatch have a story? What is the story? So I went to their YouTube channel and I looked at their playlists, and they have a playlist called Overwatch Lore. And I'm like, oh, I should probably watch all these videos to see what the hell is going on in the story. And then I figured out not even the Overwatch playlist knows what's going on in the story. So who the fuck cares? To properly explain why Overwatch lore makes no sense, we have to kind of look at it, right? We have to look at the start. And the start, from my knowledge, is with Genesis. Genesis explains the start of Omnicorp. Omnicorp is a robotics corporation that has been using state-of-the-art AI technology to help with making robotics to replace jobs that people don't want to do. You know, like they show us firefighting, vacuuming, hotel service, stuff like that. And they use these things called God programs. God programs basically are just like a centralized AI system that gives a bunch of information to the entire system. So you have one AI that tells 20 different little robots to do things and to adjust accordingly to orders supposedly given to it. Now, where the story really kicks off is when they hire this tech prodigy genius girl. This tech prodigy genius, I don't remember her name. And she makes the first Omnic. She makes the first Omnic. This Omnic is the first that is sentient individual from the programs, right? And this Omnic is declared a human being. It's declared a human being in court. And they have this court case, and they're like, yeah, this Omnic's a human being because it is sentient and it has emotion. And then it goes on this big journey across the world. And then after that, Omnicorp just fucking dips. They just they're awful. They have bad management, and then they lose a bunch of stuff. Like they lose a bunch of employees, and they lose all this stuff, and they lose all their money, and then they get shut down. And once they get shut down, during this big odyssey, the Omnic that they made goes to the mountains and starts to study the meaning of their life. And that doesn't sound important, but I guess it kind of is, and it sets up a bunch of stuff later. But they're up there on that mountain, and then we go back to we go back to the Omnicorp factory, and one of the God programs, whose original mission was to serve the world as best as it could, has started to make military robots to strike back against humanity, and because humanity is not great for the world. All at once, the world is invaded by these robots. They're all we're gonna beat you up. You know, they're freaking Normandy style beating the crap out of people. And people are like, oh, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And then Overwatch is formed. The namesake of the series is formed. And they're this elite strike team to fight back against the robots, right? They're here to fight back against the robots and to do the right thing. So Overwatch is fighting back against the robots. But even with Overwatch's help, these guys are getting folded. These guys' clothes are getting folded with them in it. Like, it is brutal. It is brutal. So with Overwatch, they're still struggling. And they're like, we have to find some way to stop this. And finally, they're like, oh my God, the Omnic, there's one robot in the world that is not affected by this. And it's that first Omnic we made that's sentient. And it's like, oh my gosh, we need to go see if she can help. And so They finally find her, and they're like, all right, let's do this. We need your help to save the world. But to do so, you're basically gonna die. Like, basically, you're gonna die, and you're not gonna be an individual anymore. And she's like, bet, brother, bet. I will save the world, even if I die. So they put her in this machine, and it broadcasts to all the robots across the world. And it's like, hey, bruh, you can be your own person. You can do your own shit. You are an individual. And then all the robots are like, hold on. This guy's kind of spitting. Hold on. And then all of them gain sentience thanks to the transmission. So they all gain sentience, and then a bunch of them join Overwatch, a bunch of them don't. It depends, because they all have their own free will, so they do whatever they want. And then, and finally, they find out the god program, who's named Anubis. They find it, they triangulate it, and then they seal it up, and they isolate it, and they put it in this thing, and then the world is at peace. Like, the world, oh yay, the world's cool, the world's safe. And they finally are able to bring this to a close. And that's the first Omnic Crisis. Now, after the first Omnic Crisis, we have the disbanding of Overwatch, because the world's like, we don't need Overwatch anymore, and you guys are just causing a bunch of people to die, and like, you guys are supposed to be our heroes, and yet people are still dying. And so Overwatch is governmentally mandated to be disbanded. And if you're a member of Overwatch, it is illegal to do any vigilantism, any of that stuff. And all of that is good and well. So all this stuff happens. And from my understanding, years down the line, a couple years later, this group called Null Sector starts popping up. And Null Sector is like the original Omnic Crisis. They're a bunch of robots, and they're out here to destroy humanity. And with Null Sector is supposedly, from my understanding, Ramatra. Like, Ramatra, one of the characters, is supposedly in league with Null Sector. So Null Sector is being led by Ramatra and is in league with Ramatra. Now, another group called Talon is also out there. Talon is like this criminal organization. It's what Reaper is a part of, and Doomfist, and Sombra, and Talon's all working with each other, and they're all trying to get information on where these Overwatch agents are. So Null Sector is attacking the world. At the same time, Talon is trying to get information. So Talon goes out and harasses Winston and tries to get the information on where the Overwatch agents are. And it doesn't go well. Like they get clapped, and Winston calls Overwatch back together. Against international law, Winston is like, guys, we gotta pull up. Look at all this stuff that Null Sector is doing. The Overwatch comes back together, and Talon goes out and is just harassing stuff. Now, Talon is run by a couple people, and includes a couple people. From the videos that they show you, Talon has Doomfist, Sombra, Sigma, and they have a Omnic, who's this big powerhouse money guy, right? He has all this money. He runs like Santa Monica, I think it was. I will edit over text and post if that's not right. He runs this city, and he's doing all this stuff. And they also have Mauga. Mauga is part of Talon. And most of this is completely inconsequential, because Talon sucks. Like, Ramatra works with Talon a lot. And even Ramatra's like, bro, Talon sucks. These guys are terrible at their jobs. Oh, Widowmaker. Widowmaker is also with them. Like, Ramatra is like, these guys suck. Guys are not good at their job. Marquise is also like, Marquise the Omnic is also like, hey, these guys fucking blow. These guys aren't good at their jobs. Like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Finally, supposedly, Overwatch, supposedly these guys are all trying to figure out a way to get out of Talon or something. And Sombra is two-timing Talon. She's like, she was sent on this mission to kill this Russian innovator who has been working with the Omnics to get all this information and get all these innovative designs. And she's like, instead of killing her, she blackmails her and is like, hey, give me info and I won't literally ruin your life. And so we see Sombra do this, I think twice. I think there's another time that she does this, but I don't remember because it was so inconsequential and I don't care. But Sombra's two-timing Talon. Like, Sombra is straight up just two-timing Talon. And there's all these other people who are just like, don't want to be in Talon and don't want to work with Talon anymore because Talon is just not efficient. Talon is just becoming an inefficient terrorist group and is not doing their purpose. But for some reason, all these people are still members of Talon. Now, with the whole Null Sector thing, you think that we would have a ton of information about Null Sector. These are the guys, the bad guys, the cause of the second Omnic crisis, and the thing that gets Winston and all of Overwatch back together. But no, there's really not a ton of information about Null Sector at all. Null Sector is shockingly underdeveloped as a villain group because Null Sector doesn't have a clear motivation other than killing humanity. And, well, up until now they didn't. But now that Ramatra has been seen with Null Sector, it's starting to fall into place a lot more of their goals. Where they kidnapped a bunch of Omnics, and Ramatra's doing this weird thing where he's like putting these devices on them that's wiping their personalities and stuff. And Ramatra says it's to help them ascend and become something else. But we don't know what that is at the moment. But Null Sector obviously has some goal that aligns with Ramatra, like with the Omnics. Null Sector wants to do something with the Omnics. It's weird, and I don't understand it, but they want to do something with the Omnics, and they're helping them do stuff with the Omnics. Now, all of this is happening, and there's just none of it aligns with each other. Let me explain. So Ramatra wants to save the Omnics, and he's working with Null Sector to save the Omnics, because in the end, Ramatra is actually a disciple of the same master that taught Zenyatta. And he believes that the Omnics deserve better, which is true. The Omnics deserve better. And he believes in Omnic, basically supremacy, where he believes that Omnics deserve the world more than humanity because humanity does nothing but oppress and destroy. He is working with Null Sector supposedly to help the Omnics. But Null Sector is a massive, massive terrorist group. Like, these guys are destroying anything and everything that gets in their way. And until we see Ramatra talk about it, it is assumed that that Null Sector is also just destroying Omnics. Like, we see all the time, reports of all these fatalities and stuff, and it is assumed that part of those fatalities is Omnics. And so when we get to the Sojourn trailer where she's in Canada and she's doing all this stuff and she's like being a vigilante, and we see that underground group of Omnics. That underground group of Omnics is supposedly with Null Sector, but all of those guys were not being controlled by Null Sector like the other Omnics were. So it's like, is Null Sector run by Omnics, or is Null Sector opposed by Omnics? Or, like, is it assisted by Omnics? Like, there's no clear lines of ally and foe. And so we get to the point where we see in a subsequent animated trailer for Mauga, basically, we see Talon invading a Null Sector ship. Why would Talon be invading a Null Sector ship when Ramatra works with Null Sector? What are they doing? They are friends with Ramatra, who is working with Null Sector. So what? Why are they invading this ship? Why does Sombra and Doomfist need this power core? What are they doing? It's never elaborated on. In the videos, at least. Maybe in like the short novels or something. But in the stuff that they show us, in their playlist, they don't tell us. And so, with all of this happening, and with Omnicore, and all of this stuff, and the first Omnic War, which all of this stuff is happening, right? And so there's this second Omnic crisis going on, and we see in the Paris mission with Winston and Tracer and May and stuff, we see that the second Omnic thing, it's a big deal. Like, all of this is a big deal. Null Sector is making big moves. We see in the Wu Yang trailer, Null Sector is a serious danger. Like, Null Sector is doing all this stuff. But we never, ever see Null Sector outside of getting their asses kicked. So, how is Null Sector winning this war? And we finally get reasonings for Null Sector's efficiency in the most recent trailer. In the most recent video, we got more context. And Null Sector apparently has a very global presence. And they've been doing all this stuff, and they kidnapped all these Omnics. Right, that isn't what matters. But what they teach us in that is that they have universal programming. So basically, Null Sector is also ran by a God program, where Null Sector operates off of a central command that gives out smaller commands to all of its aspects, and that works similarly to the first Omnic Crisis. So basically, this is just the first Omnic Crisis with a different name. And Null Sector has no clear goal right now. But the thing that really bothers me about all of this is that there is no mention of many, many characters in the mainline story. Like, we barely see anything of Junker Queen and of all of that Australia stuff, even though supposedly Roadhog was the cause of all of the destruction in Australia. Like, I only learned this because one of my friends told me about it, but Australia was destroyed because of one of the main characters you play as, apparently. And we just never learn about it in these videos. Like, it is a super important plot beat, and they don't teach us about it. And that's what really bothers me, is that all of these animated trailers and all of these character trailers do nothing for a lot of the very important lore. Like, the Kiriko trailer does nothing. It teaches us absolutely nothing about the world and absolutely nothing about this stuff other than the fact that Kiriko exists. And that's kind of the problem that I have with the newer trailers in general. They are never about the world and about what's going on in the world. It's about the individual character and how the world molds to that character. So, like, why are there parts of the world that are completely unaffected by Null Sector? That is not explained in the main playlist. And maybe it's explained in some light novel or comic that I have not read. But the important part is that in all of this stuff, like, they have an entire playlist that's supposed to teach me what's happening, and it doesn't teach me what's happening. It barely teaches me anything. I've had to make so many assumptions about all this stuff because it barely teaches you anything. It barely teaches you what's going on, why there's a second Omnic Crisis, what the first Omnic Crisis was, because in Genesis, they barely explain what Anubis is. They just say it's a god program, but there's this big, like, tomb thing that Anubis exhibits. Like, why does Anubis look like a giant Anubis statue? Why is that what that looks like? Why wouldn't it just be a normal thing? It doesn't explain anything. And that's the biggest problem with this main playlist. It doesn't explain the greater issues and intricacies of what all of this is about. It just says things and expects you to understand it because you've done all this extracurricular reading. I have not read everything. And even in the trailers that drop a bunch of lore, like in the Winston one and in all of Genesis and in all of this stuff, like even in the Ramatra comic reading, it barely drops enough information to keep me intrigued. I'm not even intrigued anymore. And in this most recent one, they just regurgitated, like in this most recent trailer lore drop, literally just regurgitated information we already knew from a different perspective. And that could have been interesting. It could have been interesting to see Sojin's perspective on the mass kidnapping of all of these Omnics, like Ramatra talked about. Ramatra talks about this. But Sojin just says it happened. She doesn't have theories as to why it's happening. She doesn't talk about the control devices. She doesn't talk about any of this stuff. She just says it's happening. And that's kind of the issue, is that the trailer was more about the Overwatch agents and not about Null Sector and about all this stuff. And even in Wu Yang's trailer, they talk about that, like, Null Sector attacked this college in China, but they don't say why. Like, why would Null Sector attack that? Like, is this a logistical area that, like, Null Sector could be using? Is there something that Null Sector is trying to achieve by attacking them? It is never explained. And that is an issue. That is an issue with the game, like, with the story. And the story hasn't moved at all. The story isn't moving. It hasn't changed. It hasn't become anything in almost a decade. Nothing has happened. It's almost been a decade since Overwatch 1 released. It has been over a decade since the first gameplay trailers for Overwatch released. And this game has nothing. Nothing has changed. Nothing has happened. Like, maybe in the invasion game mode, there's more stuff on Null Sector. Okay. All of this stuff should be accessible without me having to pay a $30 DLC. I should be able to understand what's happening in your game without paying money. And all of this is needless to say that none of the trailers explain why the actual agents are fighting each other in the 5v5 format. They don't explain anything. This isn't like sparring. This isn't some stuff where it's like, oh, we're just training to fight. We're just fighting against each other because we're training for a bigger deal. Like, no, it never explains that. It never tells us, are these real battles that they're actually fighting, or is this just garbage? Because in Eichenwald, we see the remnants of the first Omnic Crisis. We see a bunch of Bastion units just destroyed everywhere. But is it because we're at that period where they were fighting in the first Omnic Crisis? Or is it because this is just how this map looks? Like, what are the maps entailing? What is all of this entailing? And like with Venture name drops Ilios in her trailer. In their trailer, they're like, oh, Ilios is this beautiful city and they're still partying even though it's been thousands of years. But they never explain why Ilios. Like, they never explain why we're in Ilios in the game. They just say it in the trailer and we're like, oh, point reference. But they never explain why. Why are we fighting in Ilios? Why are we fighting in any of these maps? Like, they're all character-specific maps, but they don't do anything. They don't service the story at all. They don't have any lore for us to read or to understand in the game. And that is a massive, massive issue. It just feels like Overwatch has abandoned its story. Like, there's no story there anymore. The story doesn't matter anymore. Like, it's all about the characters and it's all about this stuff. And I think it's all culminated in Kiriko. I think Kiriko was the sign of the end of this story. Because Kiriko is a nothing burger. Kiriko is like a Reddit-pilled millennial character that serves no purpose for the story. Like, she doesn't serve any reason to exist. She just doesn't. She doesn't explain anything. Her existence is contradictory to a lot of things. Like, supposedly, when she was younger, she trained with Hanzo and Genji, even though they're in their 40s and she's in her 20s. So, when she was younger, they would have been in their 20s. So, like, how does that make sense? Like, when they were young, she would have been in her dad's nutsack. I don't understand how this makes sense. Like, Kiriko does nothing for the story at all. Nothing. She doesn't explain anything. She doesn't, like, we don't even see her fight Null Sector. We don't see anything. Kiriko has no involvement whatsoever. She has the least personality. She has the least care and attention put into her story. She is the least involved. And that trend only continued with the new characters besides Ramatra and Junker Queen, where Junker Queen's story is very involved and shows us a lot about Junkertown, where we see that Junkertown has this like Colosseum-esque election system where if you win in this Colosseum, then you become the next Junker King / Queen / Monarch or / ruler. And we see that if you lose, you can choose to be like, you can banish somebody into the wasteland and they just have to live in the wasteland and become wastelanders. And apparently wastelanders are second grade citizens in Junkertown. So it's like all of Junker Queen's trailer explains a lot about Junkertown and about their system through her action. Through her action of fighting in the Colosseum and in trying to overtake the role of the Junker Queen. That was a masterful trailer, even if I think that some of the voice acting was rough, and I think that Overwatch has always had an issue with setting unrealistic expectations of their characters in their trailers, where like she does a bunch of stuff you just straight up can't do in the game. And I think that's a bit of an issue. But I still think that it is a remarkable trailer and it teaches us a lot of stuff. And Ramatra's trailer is masterfully made. Ramatra's trailer teaches us so much about Ramatra as a character and about his motivations and his feelings and about all this stuff. And it gives us so much context for why he hates humanity, why he wants to destroy humanity, and why he wants revenge. Because he has been wronged so many times. So it's like, yeah, it makes sense. Ramatra's trailer is masterful. And the only trailer that holds a candle to these two is the Bastion one. The Bastion one, is amazing. Last Bastion gives us so much context and so much stuff for Bastion, not only as Bastion as a character, but also the environment and the scars of the first Omnic crisis. And so we go on to see the motivation and the pain and the hurt that the Omnic crisis caused on both sides. We see from Bastion's perspective, who was part of the Omnic War, who was a unit going against humanity in the Omnic War, we see his perspective and his trauma and his hurt, even though he's like a robot. He's a robot. He's a stinky robot. Like he's not a human being, and yet there was so much emotion and so much raw stuff in that one trailer. And that's where all of this falls apart. Is that I know that these guys can write and make compelling trailers for characters who can't even speak. Bastion doesn't say a word. He just goes wee woo the entire time. And yet, they wrote this amazing story with him, and I know that Blizzard can do better than this. They just aren't. Blizzard is just refusing to make quality products. For what? And this entire thing is just because I'm so sad that this story is left out to dry. The Null Sector stuff, this entire setting with the Omnics and all this stuff. This is amazing world building that is hindered down by garbage writing. And they just give up. They've given up. They don't care about this story anymore. This most recent lore drop said nothing, did nothing, is nothing. And I'm just so massively disappointed. I'm so disappointed. I want this story to be good. I want this game to be good. I want people to like this game like I do. Even if its community is awful, even if everyone who plays it is genuinely stupid, I still want people to enjoy this the way that I do and see this the way that I do. But it's impossible when the developers leave everyone out to dry.